The lawyer closed his briefcase, the final papers stacked neatly on the polished oak table, and just like that, it was over. Everything, the house, the stocks, the family business, all of it, went to her. My stepsister sat across from me, chin high, smile tight, like she'd won some silent war I never knew we were fighting. Stepmother dabbed her tears with a silk handkerchief, whispering how proud Dad would have been, and I sat there, hands folded in my lap, quiet, invisible, just like always. But then the lawyer paused. His hand hovered over the briefcase, hesitated, then reached beneath the stack of folders. He pulled out one more envelope, smaller, older, yellowed at the edges like it had been waiting far longer than the rest, and there, written in my father's familiar, steady handwriting, was my name. Only my name. The room went silent. My stepsister's smile faded. Stepmother shifted in her chair, her bracelet clinking against the table in the quiet. I stared at the envelope. Not moving, not breathing. I didn't know what was inside. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was an apology. Or maybe it was the only thing he ever meant for me to have. The lawyer slid the envelope across the table. No explanations, no ceremony, just a quiet reminder that not every story ends when the will is read. Sometimes the real story waits in what's left unopened. Long before there were lawyers and inheritance papers, there was just a house, and in that house, long before she was my stepsister, I was simply home. But then she came. A bright laugh, perfect grades, effortless charm, and suddenly I wasn't enough. At first, I tried to share, tried to be the bigger sister. But the dinners became quieter on my side of the table. Dad's stories stopped ending with my name, and stepmother's smiles, well, they never quite reached me. I told myself it didn't matter. That family wasn't a contest. But when your drawings disappear from the fridge and your wins go unnoticed, you start to wonder where your place really is. I watched from the hallway as she played piano for Dad, his laughter filling the room like it used to when I built Lego castles at his feet. She wasn't cruel, just perfect in a way I could never be, and little by little, my seat at the table became a shadow. So I stopped fighting for it, stopped asking for bedtime stories, stopped believing that being seen was something you could earn. Instead, I found comfort in the quiet places of the house, the attic where dust held forgotten toys, the porch swing where I listened to rain fall in steady rhythm, the old oak tree where no one asked who was smarter, prettier, or more lovable. That's where I built my world, silent, but safe. And yet, no matter how far I distanced myself, some small part of me still waited for the day Dad would remind me, I see you too. But the years passed. Birthdays faded into quiet dinners. Report cards went uncelebrated. And now, here we were, a lifetime of moments later, and the lawyer's table felt just like that dinner table all over again. One seat filled with smiles, one seat quietly forgotten, until that envelope slid across the wood grain. For the first time in years, something had my name on it, and maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible after all. I stared at the envelope resting between my fingers. It felt lighter than I imagined, but somehow heavier than everything else in that room. For a moment, the lawyer's voice faded, the walls disappeared, and I was somewhere else entirely. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, the kind where the house felt too quiet and the world too small. Dad found me on the porch swing, legs curled beneath me, watching the raindrops race down the railing. He sat beside me, pulling his old jacket tighter against the chill. For a while, we just listened to the rain. Then he spoke, soft, steady, the way he always did when the words mattered. One day, this house won't be the legacy I leave behind. I turned to him, confused. "But the house is ours," I said. He smiled gently. "A house is just wood and paint, but love, that's what you carry with you." I didn't understand it then. I thought legacy meant things you could touch, keys, titles, bank accounts. But maybe he was trying to tell me something quieter, something deeper. He placed his hand over mine and added, "When the world forgets your name, remember who sat beside you in the quiet." And now, here I was, older, tired, still sitting alone in the quiet. But for the first time in a long time, I wondered if this envelope wasn't about what he gave her, but what he quietly saved for me. I traced my thumb over the paper's worn edge. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. But either way, I wasn't going to let fear keep it closed. The house felt too loud with silence, so I stepped outside, letting the cool air calm my racing thoughts. I found Mr. Whittaker sitting on the garden bench beneath the old oak tree, Dad's oldest friend. The kind of man who spoke rarely, but when he did, the words stuck. He looked up from his book and smiled softly. "Didn't expect to see you out here," he said. I sat beside him, tucking the envelope into my coat pocket like a secret I wasn't ready to share. "Did you know about all this?" I asked, nodding toward the house where the reading had ended minutes ago. He sighed, closing the book. "Your father didn't tell me details, but he worried, more than you knew." I stayed quiet, letting the words settle between us. "He once said," Mr. Whittaker continued, "it's easy to leave money. It's harder to leave peace." I felt the ache rise in my chest. Did he ever say why it always felt like I wasn't enough? Whittaker turned to me, his gaze steady but gentle. "Because he thought giving you peace was worth more than proving your place. He didn't want you to feel like you had to fight for what was already yours." I blinked against the tears that threatened to fall. So he gave it all to her. Whittaker shook his head, a quiet laugh escaping. "No, child. He gave her what she thought she wanted. But he gave you what she never knew to ask for." The wind rustled through the leaves overhead, carrying his words farther than I could reach. I sat there for a while, the envelope pressing against my heart like a weight and a comfort all at once. Maybe this wasn't about winning. Maybe it was about understanding what I had always carried, but never claimed. I stood, brushing the dust from my coat. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, returning to his book, as if our conversation had always been a part of the story. And maybe it was. When I stepped back inside, the house felt colder. The laughter from the reading room had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of voices clearing away the remnants of inheritance. I found my stepsister by the fireplace, sipping wine, her posture relaxed, as if the day had gone exactly as planned. She saw the envelope still in my hand and smiled, thin, polite, distant. "Oh, that," she said, nodding toward it. "Probably just something sentimental. Dad liked to write those little letters." Her voice carried the weight of dismissal, wrapped in sugar. "I'm sure it's sweet," she added, turning back to her glass. "But nothing important, nothing important." The words slid through me sharper than anything the lawyer could have read aloud. I stood there for a moment, the envelope warm against my palm. I could have argued, could have demanded she respect it, respect me. But what would that change? You can't teach someone to value what they've already decided is worthless. So instead, I smiled softly. Not in agreement, but in understanding. She would never see beyond the balance sheets and property deeds. That was her inheritance. Let her keep it. Mine. I would find out soon enough. I turned without a word, leaving her in the glow of a fire built on things she could hold but never carry. Upstairs, the quiet welcomed me back. I placed the envelope on my nightstand, beside a framed photo of Dad and me beneath the old oak tree. I didn't open it, not yet. Some truths need the right silence before they speak. And tonight, I was finally learning how to listen. Later that night, she sat alone by the fireplace, the shadows stretching long across the walls. The wine had lost its sweetness, the room, its warmth. She held the deed papers in her lap, her name printed boldly at the top, proof on paper that she had won. But why did it feel so quiet? Her mind drifted backward, to a day long before lawyers and inheritances. She was 7, sitting on the staircase, listening to Dad tell bedtime stories. Stories meant for someone else. Stories filled with laughter that didn't include her name. She clutched her stepmother's hand, pretending not to care, but deep down, she did. Every missed story, every forgotten dance recital, every photo where she stood just slightly off to the side. She told herself, one day, I'll have something no one can take away. And now she did. The house, the stocks, and the legacy. But none of it felt the way she thought it would. She glanced towards the staircase, where laughter no longer echoed, and for the first time she wondered, did taking everything finally make her enough? Or did it only prove she'd never believed she was? She thought of the envelope upstairs. What if it contained the one thing she could never claim? Dad's quiet love. The thought chilled her more than the empty room. So she left it unopened, let it stay a mystery, because some truths are harder to lose than never having them at all. She sipped her wine, her smile faint and tired. Victory was hers, but peace. Peace still belonged to someone else. I stood at the window, the envelope resting on my nightstand like a quiet dare. For hours, I had imagined what it could hold. A letter, a keepsake, or maybe just silence wrapped in paper. I thought about her words downstairs, probably just something sentimental. And for the first time, they didn't sting. Because maybe it was, and maybe that was enough. I didn't need this envelope to prove my father loved me. I didn't need signatures or seals to claim my place in this family. I just needed to know that even in his quietest moments, he left something behind that spoke only to me. I picked it up, the paper cool against my palms. For a moment, I considered tearing it open, reading whatever truth he'd left in a rush of emotion. But I stopped, because some answers are better heard when your heart is still. Not angry, not hurting, just ready. I set the envelope gently on my desk, beside the faded photo of us beneath the oak tree. It would wait. And when I was ready, I would open it. Not for her, not for them, but for me. I turned off the light and crawled into bed, the quiet settling over me, not as loneliness, but as peace. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. The next morning, I found myself back in Mr. Halpin's office, not because I had legal business, but because sometimes silence needs a witness. He looked up from his papers, glasses perched low on his nose, and offered the kind of smile that makes you feel seen without asking for attention. I was wondering when you'd stop by, he said softly. I sat across from him, the envelope resting quietly between us on the polished oak desk. I haven't opened it yet, I admitted. Halpin nodded, not surprised. Your father wasn't a complicated man, but he knew when to wait for the right moment. I traced the edge of the envelope, feeling its weight all over again. What if it changes nothing? I whispered. What if it changes everything? He leaned back, hands folded, letting the question breathe. Sometimes the truth is just a mirror, he said. It doesn't give you new answers. It just shows you what you already knew, but needed to see. I let the words settle, gentle and steady. He didn't tell me to open it. He didn't tell me to walk away. He simply gave me space to choose. Your father once told me, Halpern continued, I raised my girls differently. One will inherit the walls of this house, the other will inherit the quiet that holds them up. I looked down, tears pressing at the edges of my vision. I never wanted the walls. I whispered, I know, he said softly, which is why he gave you something more lasting. I stood, gathering the envelope and my courage in one slow breath. Thank you, I said quietly. Halpern smiled again, warm and calm. Whatever it says, remember, it doesn't define you. It just reflects what he wanted you to carry forward. And with that, I left, still unsure of what I would find, but finally steady enough to face it when the time felt right. That evening, when the house settled into quiet again, I sat at my desk beneath the fading light. The envelope rested before me, patient and still. With a steady breath, I slipped my finger beneath the seal and opened it. No fanfare, no courtroom drama, just paper folded gently like something too fragile for the world to hold roughly. Inside, a single brass key slipped into my palm, cool, worn smooth by time, and a letter, handwritten, steady, familiar, for the places you will need when the world forgets to leave the light on. Below that, an address, one I hadn't heard in years. The cabin by Willow Creek, a place Dad and I used to go when the world felt too loud. No mention of money, no hidden fortune, just a door waiting to be opened and a place waiting to be remembered. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet tear slip down my cheek, not because it was a grand gift, but because it was his way of saying, I remembered you in the quiet places. I placed the key beside the family photo on my desk. The legacy wasn't what she claimed in the lawyer's office. It wasn't what they applauded over fine wine. It was this, a key, a place, and a quiet love that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be real. I stood, slipping the letter into my coat pocket and holding the key in my palm a moment longer. Tomorrow, I would go. But tonight, I simply let the peace settle where the noise used to be. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, soft and warm against the countertops. She poured her coffee as usual, expecting the house to hum with its quiet routines. But the chair across the table sat empty, and the envelope gone. She set the mug down slowly, the clink louder than she meant. For a moment, she listened. No footsteps upstairs, no kettle boiling, just quiet. She checked the driveway. The car was gone too. No note, no explanation, and something unfamiliar twisted in her chest, control slipping between her fingers. She told herself it didn't matter. Let her have her little trip. It won't change what's written in the will. But the words felt thin this morning, empty, in a way yesterday's victory hadn't prepared her for, because for the first time she realised she didn't know what was in that envelope, and worse, she didn't know what it meant to her father or to the sister she thought she had already defeated. She took a sip of coffee, its warmth failing to quiet the chill creeping in. Victory was supposed to feel like security, but this felt like waiting for a door to open in a room you thought you'd already locked. She glanced at the old photo on the mantel, the one of the two of them, kids beneath the oak tree, and for a fleeting second she wondered if the only thing she had inherited was the silence she helped create. The drive to Willow Creek was quiet, no radio, no calls, just the steady hum of tyres against winding roads I hadn't travelled in years. When I pulled up to the cabin, the morning mist curled along the roof like an old friend waiting to be remembered. I stepped out slowly, key in hand, heart steady. The door creaked open, just as it always had. No grand unveiling, no hidden treasure, just a familiar room filled with dust, quiet air, and the faint scent of cedarwood and forgotten summers. I walked across the worn floorboards, my footsteps the only sound. The same rocking chair sat by the window, the same books lined the crooked shelf, And on the mantel, right where he'd left it, a faded photo of the two of us at the creek, smiles easy and real. I set down my bag, the letter still tucked inside. For the first time in days, I wasn't carrying anything heavier than myself. No inheritance to fight for, no names to defend, just peace, quiet and whole. I lit the old stove, boiled water for tea, and sat by the window, watching the morning stretch wide across the trees. No one knew I was here. And for once, I didn't need them to. The house back there, their voices, their victories, their noise, could wait. This moment was mine, and I chose to stay in it. I silenced my phone, tucking it away in the desk drawer. If they wondered where I was, let them. For once, the quiet didn't mean I was lost. It meant I was home, back at the house. The victory started to feel incomplete. She sat at the dining table, paperwork spread before her, the numbers lined up like soldiers waiting for her command. But one document, the final release of estate funds, remained unsigned. She called Mr. Halpern's office. His assistant answered, polite but distant. Yes, ma'am. The final processing is on hold pending review of an additional letter. Letter? She asked, her voice sharp despite her attempt at calm. There's mention of an addendum, possibly something your father left sealed. Mr. Halpern is waiting to confirm before proceeding. The words hit harder than she expected. I thought everything was settled, she said, more to herself than the assistant. Almost everything, came the quiet reply. She hung up, the room suddenly too still. Almost everything. Her eyes flicked towards the staircase, where her stepsister's door remained closed and quiet. She hadn't heard from her since yesterday, and her car was still gone. She tried calling, voicemail. She texted. No reply. For the first time, silence didn't feel like victory. It felt like waiting for something she couldn't control. She stood by the window, watching the driveway, expecting, hoping, dreading what she might see next. Because if there was one thing she feared more than losing the estate, it was realizing she never fully understood what her father had left behind, and worse, that he may have left it for someone else. That night, beneath the steady hum of crickets and the crackle of the old stove, I finally unfolded the letter. The handwriting was familiar, steady, unrushed. If you're reading this, it means I've finally learned how to say what I never could face to face. I smiled faintly, the tears quiet but steady. He continued, I left you the key. Not because you needed a place to hide, but because everyone needs a place to return to when the world forgets their name. The words pulled me back years ago. Sitting on the porch swing, my head resting on his shoulder, when he whispered, when the noise gets too loud, find the quiet that holds you. I thought I'd forgotten that moment. Turns out, it was the only thing I carried with me. The letter spoke of memories more than instructions. The mornings fishing by Willow Creek, the nights reading under blankets by flashlight, the times we sat in silence, saying everything without words. You were never meant to carry this family's noise, he wrote. You were meant to carry its quiet. I folded the letter gently, my heart steady in a way it hadn't been for years. No inheritance paper could replace that. No estate deed could weigh as much as those quiet moments tucked inside my bones. I placed the letter beside the key on the mantel, letting them sit in the quiet he always trusted me to keep. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need to prove my place in his story. He had written me into it long ago. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she pulled up to the cabin. She sat in the car for a moment, heart pounding against a quiet she couldn't shake. What was she even doing here? Coming to gloat, to demand an explanation, to find what she'd never had the courage to ask for. She stepped out, the chill of the evening air brushing against her pride. The door was open, Soft light spilled from the windows, and there she was, sitting by the fire, a book in her lap, tea in hand. No defences, no walls, just home. Their eyes met, neither of them speaking right away. Finally, her sister broke the quiet. "You found me." She swallowed, unsure whether it felt like an accusation or a welcome. "You left," she said softly, without saying anything. Her sister nodded, setting the book aside. Not everything needs to be announced. She glanced around the cabin, taking in the worn furniture, the faded curtains, the air that smelled like memories. "This is what he left you." Her sister smiled faintly. "Number. This is what he shared with me, long before the will." She stood, walking over to the mantel where the key and letter rested. She didn't offer them, she didn't hide them. She just let them be seen. And in that moment, Stepsister realised everything she'd been fighting for had already been given. But it wasn't hers to claim. She took a quiet breath. "I thought I had to take it all to prove I belonged." Her sister met her gaze, steady but kind. "You never had to take anything. You only had to stay." The words settled between them, soft and unpolished. No apology, no blame, just truth. For now, that was enough. She stood at the door, keys in hand, ready to leave the cabin and return to the life waiting for her. But something held her still. A weight she hadn't noticed until the quiet made it impossible to ignore. She slipped her hand into her coat pocket, fingers brushing against something worn and familiar, a photo, faded at the edges, soft from years of being carried, but never shown. It was them. 2 little girls beneath the oak tree, mud on their shoes, wind in their hair, smiles wide and real, long before lawyers, long before wills, when love was simple because it didn't have to be earned. She stared at it for a moment, the memory pressing gently against her defences. Then, without a word, she crossed the room. Her sister watched from the hearth, saying nothing, just letting the moment be what it was. She placed the photo on the mantel beside the key and the letter, not as a peace offering, not as an apology, just as a reminder of what they had before the world taught them to fight for things they already shared. She turned to leave, the door creaking softly as it opened to the night. At the threshold she paused. "You were always better at finding the quiet," she said, her voice low, and then she was gone. No grand gestures, no promises, just the first quiet step toward something new. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone in the quiet once again. But this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of the memories we once shared before life taught us to divide them. I walked over to the mantel, my fingers brushing over the photo she left behind. Our smiles were crooked, our hair wild, but it was real, and somehow it still was. Beside it, the key and the letter sat, patient and steady, like anchors in a world that kept shifting. I sat by the window, the late afternoon light stretching across the floor, warm and still. For years, I thought peace was something I had to earn, through their approval, through their love, through their recognition. But sitting here, surrounded by nothing but creaking floorboards and fading light, I realised peace was never something they could give. It was something I carried all along, quiet and waiting, just like this place. I smiled softly, the kind of smile no one else needed to see. Tomorrow I might go home, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe this was home now, and for the first time, either way was fine. I poured another cup of tea, letting the warmth fill the spaces where resentment used to live. The world outside would keep spinning, they would keep chasing whatever they thought mattered most. But I had found enough, and sometimes enough is everything. Back at the house, the morning arrived without ceremony. The sun filtered through the kitchen windows, spilling light across the empty chairs. But one chair stayed empty. And for the first time, they noticed, Stepsister sat at the dining table, fingers drumming lightly against her coffee mug. The house was hers now, the rooms, the deeds, the titles. But not the quiet, not the presence that once filled the silence with something more than air. She checked her phone again. No messages, no missed calls, just absence. And somehow, it felt louder than any argument they'd ever had. The lawyer's final email arrived mid-morning. The estate is now fully transferred. There are no further documents to disclose. She stared at the words, reading them twice. No further documents, but no further answers either. Victory felt hollow when there was no one left to fight. She wandered through the house, each room more silent than the last. The study where their father used to read aloud, the living room where birthdays were once celebrated quietly, without guests, the porch swing that no one had sat on since her sister left. For a fleeting second, she thought of driving to the cabin, but she didn't, maybe because she knew that some doors you leave closed out of respect, not fear. And so she made herself another cup of coffee, sat at the table, and listened to the quiet. Not because it comforted her, but because, for the first time, it asked her to sit with it, without trying to fill it. The morning light slipped across the cabin floor as I stirred the tea, the quiet filling the space where doubt used to live. I wandered toward the bookshelf, its dusty shelves holding forgotten stories from another lifetime. One book fell into my hands without effort, its spine cracked, its cover worn soft. Inside, a note tucked between the pages, Dad's handwriting, steady as ever. Find your quiet, even when the world is loud. The same words he whispered to me beneath the porch swing so many years ago. I smiled, the ache in my chest softening like a bruise finally healing. This cabin was never about escape. It was about remembering who I was before the noise told me otherwise. I placed the book on the mantel beside the key and the photo. 3 quiet things, each carrying more weight than the house full of deeds and titles ever could. I sat by the window, letting the breeze carry the memory forward. Some legacies are written in ink, others in the spaces between the words, and I was done waiting for someone else to read them. I closed my eyes, not to forget, but to remember more clearly. And for the first time, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt whole. The next morning, I folded the letter one last time, its words now resting quietly in my heart instead of my hands. I placed it back on the mantel beside the key and the photo. The book stayed where it was, waiting for another quiet morning to be opened. I looked around the cabin, its walls steady, its floors creaking with memories, its windows letting in the light as they always had. This place didn't belong to me, it belonged to the quiet itself, and maybe someday someone else would need it. Maybe my stepsister, maybe a child wandering too far from home, or maybe no one at all. I left the key in plain sight, not hidden and not locked away, because some doors are meant to be opened by those who truly seek them. I stepped outside, the morning air cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and something older than regret. As I closed the door behind me, I smiled softly, not in farewell, but in peace. The cabin would wait, just as my father once waited for me, patient and quiet, knowing I would return when I was ready, and when I did, or when someone else did, they would find what I had found, that the quiet doesn't end. It only waits for the next heart to hear it. The drive home was quiet. No need to rush, no one waiting with questions I wasn't ready to answer. I left the cabin behind, but not the peace it gave me. That I carried with me. I thought back to the lawyer's office, the tense voices, the shifting eyes, the hands grabbing for things that couldn't follow them home. They took the house, the accounts, the titles, but the quiet, that stayed with me, and maybe that was the only part that mattered. I pulled into the driveway, the familiar creak of the front gate greeting me like an old song. Inside, the house was still. They were gone for the afternoon, leaving behind their victories and empty rooms. I placed my coat on the chair, set the kettle on the stove, and sat at the table, letting the afternoon light fill the space they once fought over. I didn't need to tell them what I found. Some things are better lived quietly, without applause, without witnesses. Legacy isn't measured in what we keep. It's measured in what we leave behind for someone else to find when they're ready. And when they are, the door will still be there, the key will still fit, and the quiet will still be waiting. So tell me, when all the noise fades, and the last will is read, and the house is empty again, what will you leave behind? And more importantly, who will find it in the quiet when you're gone? If this was your story, would you chase what they left you or protect what they never took? Tell me, what legacy would you build quietly when no one else is watching?